Excellencies, members of the Court and Livery, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual Ravenscroft lecture, which is given in memory of George Ravenscroft. So now we have a lot of guests here today who may not know that George Ravenscroft was the inventor of lead crystal glass under the patronage of the Glass Sellers Company. So we have always supported innovation in all forms of glass. And this year our speaker is Professor Paul Morrissey, who is globally renowned in the telecoms, media and technology sector. He advises international business and government on, let me see my list here now. Well, on everything.
I'll come back and help.
On everything. So, look, he's an industry veteran who has sold, grown and acquired telecoms and media assets throughout his career. Now, our members know that one of my aims this year is to raise awareness and to educate on the importance of glass in the telecoms, media and technology sector, because it has revolutionised the sector I work in, and yet most people don't really understand how. So I hope that by the end of this evening you will see why glass is essential to modern communications and why it will continue to be vital way into the future. So Paul's going to speak to us for about 30, 40 minutes or so. We'll then have some time for questions. And then my brother, Liverman Ram and Shanrugan will give a short vote of thanks, and then we can finally have a drink.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you to Vanessa, for actually working on a technical back end. That computer won't work with that machine, but she had her own. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I think I've been in here before, actually. I can't remember when. Probably in a past life. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Mesopotamia, which is a real mouthful. I've been practicing that on the train coming down to the Metaverse. That's a lot easier to say. And I'm going to explore how glass has progressed over those centuries to give us where we are today in telecommunications. So if you've all got pens, there's going to be questions afterwards. It's not an examination. And this is my view. This is really what I think has happened over the last 7,000 years. So who am I and why should you listen to me? So I'm, as Maria said, I've been in telecoms for the last 53 years. That should give you a clue. And I really look at advising people around telecommunications, but my other passion is around startups, how we enable the new economy with startups or spin-outs from universities. And you may ask how I got involved in that, and it's an interesting story, which if we're going to stay half an hour I'll tell you about. It was a story where I actually sold a telecommunications company. I didn't know I was selling a telecommunications company. I thought I was doing a bit of research at Liverpool John Moores University into what we call encryption, which is effectively ciphering. And we developed a piece of software which allowed battlefield communications to be encrypted. So imagine somebody in Afghanistan where two soldiers are talking to each other over a headphone. Well, it would be a bit disastrous if the Taliban actually could hear what was going on. You know, come round the corner, George. So we developed that technology. It was called at the time Secure Software as a Service. And I got a knock on the door one day, and I can tell you this now because the 10 years that I've signed the Official Secrets Act for has actually dissipated. And I'd never heard of this before. I'd heard of compulsory purchases in road construction, where your house is in the middle of where they're going to put a new road. But I'd never heard of a compulsory purchase in the technology industry. But I found out that there was one, and GCHQ wanted this technology and they didn't want anybody else to have it, so they bought it off me. So that was about 2008, and it let me do two things really. One, it let me give something back to the telecommunications industry. I've been in that for 2008. I've been in that for 40 years at that point. But I also wanted to give something back to where that technology came from, where that encryption technology was, where the cradle of it was, and it was in a university. And the university were doing research, and I just happened to know how to explore the commerciality of that. I don't know whether you know, but very, very few universities in the UK actually commercialise their technology. Very few. There's 3 that stand out above anybody else, and that's Imperial College, Cambridge and Oxford. The rest of them have commercialisation departments, but they have very, very few successful spin-outs. There are some exceptions, but on general, there's not. So I thought this would be a good idea. I'll go into the university and work with them about how they can take all these pieces of disparate research and maybe commercialise them. That was an interesting exercise that didn't go very far because the universities wanted to own the whole of the IP that was being created, which was not going to work. I mean, if you're somebody that's creating something, you've got to give somebody the ability to look at how they grow that and what they can do with it. I call those founders, and in fact recently I've started calling them problem initiators, because it's no use developing something that's not a problem. We have lots and lots of people who are thinking there are problems and how can I help solve that? But we also have lots of people that think they know what problems are, but nobody else agrees with them. And that's true. The biggest failure in startups, technical startups globally, and I'll give you the statistic of how many fail in a minute, but the biggest problem is solving a problem that is not a problem. And there's a thing that we call founder bias. I'm the founder. Of course I know what I'm doing. Everybody else knows what I'm doing. But in fact, they don't. So if you don't validate that problem with people external to yourself, you're never going to be able to develop that idea. So one of the things that I do with my it's a venture fund. I might be a venture capitalist. If you don't like venture capitalists, shoot me now. But I'm very early stage, and I invented the word a few years ago, workingpreneur. So explore your idea in a safe environment while you've still got a job. If you go to most venture capitalists, they'll say to you, all right, great idea, we'll give you some money, but you've got to sell your house and put that money in as well. And also, you're not working for anybody else. So this workingpreneur concept is don't leave your job until what you're doing will give you an opportunity to actually take you out of your job, if you want to. So what I've seen over the years is that a lot of that is in the education sector or the healthcare sector. We've got a lot of founders that work for us that we've enabled their businesses who are out of healthcare, hospitals. The great thing is that the hospitals let them experiment. They give them that time and that space to be a workingpreneur. And that really is a very, very interesting space. But that's nothing to do with the Metaverse, but I'm just trying to give you a bit of my history. So one of the things I've done is set up a venture fund for early stage companies. Very, very, very early stage companies. In fact, problems. And when I ask people come to me and say, I've got this idea and it's a problem, I'll tell them to go and validate it. Go and validate it outside of your environment. And I don't want you to come back with the 3 F's. And they all say, what are the 3 F's? Well, the 3 F's are investors that are friends, fools or family. Because it's easy to get them. It's easy for your mum to say, oh, George has got, I'll put some money in. We don't want that. In fact, I prohibit that as a money that's coming into a company. So that's a bit of work about what I do, and that allows me to do a lot of this other stuff for global telcos. Because the area that I'm specialising in now is artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence actually is spawned from data. And telecommunications companies have got vast amounts of data. Vast amounts of data. They don't always use it in the right way, but they have got it. And that's where a lot of these new things are coming from. So that's me. It's more than that slide out there, actually. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the, this is a tongue twister, it's Mesopotamia, because I kept calling it Nia, because that just flows off the tongue. There's an M in the end of it. So I'm going to look at the evolution of glass. I'm going to be very quick on that because all of you know more about it than I do. But I thought I'd better put a baseline in there so I know I'm talking about the right thing. And then I'll look at the impact of glass on the future of technology. Where is technology going? The role of glass in telecommunications, so that we can give something back to Maria. And there's an interesting thing about that. Telecommunications, how many of us have got a mobile phone? Right, how many of us got a fibre optic cable inside them? 0. And when we're coming to the metaverse, mobile phones are not going to work. They just haven't got the capacity. There's too much latency of how that message gets delivered to you. It's fine for comms, talking to people. It's pretty good for downloading videos. But when you're going into immersive environments, it's just not going to work. So we've got to get fibre out there, fibre to the desk, fibre to the person, in fact, in a lot of instances. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I will touch on what the metaverse is, because lots of people don't know what it is, and there's about 25,000 different definitions of it. And then I'll talk about what the role of glass is in that environment, and then the benefits of the metaverse, and then at the end I'm going to wrap up with some of the challenges of the metaverse. So, it's going to be a sort of a 30,000 feet. If you ask questions, I can drop it down to 20,000, or we can go under the sea if you've got some real questions. So, let's start off. The evolution of glass. Now, you should know this better than me. Glass has been around since the dawn of civilization, according to my research. And it first appeared in Mesopotamia, I think. By the way, I'm no expert in this, so if I get this wrong, please put your hand up and say you're talking rubbish. I'm very open to that. And it's been used for lots of different things. We know it's been used for all sorts of vessels. It's sort of stained glass on here, jewellery. So it's everywhere. It's prolific. Glass has become an integral part of where I work in telecommunications, and the access to the world, the World Wide Web, with a single click. Glass is actually in every connection that we have to that. In fact, I think I'll show you this in the next slide. That's it. Yeah, glass is, the future is very bright. It's going somewhere. I may talk now about slides that I do later, but I often say, how do we interface with the whole of our world, which we work with today? How do we interface with that? And a lot of people will say, with the closest piece of glass. Whether that be your phone, whether it be your contact lenses or your glasses. We also Google bring these glasses out that actually you can look into it, and actually almost like a fighter pilot, and have your trajectory on your windscreen. So glass is all over us, and it's what we really want to do. So it will allow us to explore what we're now talking about, the virtual world. The world is not the real world that we're in, the reality that we're in, but virtually where that's going. Where's the internet going to take us? And that's never been possible before. So the impact of glass on the future of technology. Glass has played and will continue to play an integral part to technology. It's everywhere we're in. It's shaping the future of technology all the time. We've got smartphones, televisions, tablets. All of those things don't only have a screen, they have a lot of glass in the technology behind it. And that is actually being manufactured all over the world. And it's being created, and some of the reasons it's being created for that, I'll tell you about in a few minutes. But as I said here, used it before, the closest piece of glass is where you interface with the internet. That's exactly what you do. You do it on your PC, or you do it on your phone, or you do it on your television. It's where you interface with the internet. Makes sense? Glass manufacturing and the techniques of glass manufacturing are used to create lighter, stronger, and more durable glass products. They last longer. They are very durable. They will last inside technology, like your smartphone, for a long, long time. And they give us the ability to have flexible technology inside our pieces of equipment. It's been a vital component of the development of technology ever since we started, really. And the fibre optic environment, where fibre is used to take telephone conversations or video conversations or streaming technology all around the world, is very, very important to us. And it's environmentally sustainable. So the role of glass in telecommunications, it's played a key role. Fibre optic cables have been around for, well, since I started. And you started? When I was working for GEC many years ago, we thought, that's a good idea. We could get communications into glass. Why is it a good idea? Because glass actually transmits signals a bit faster than radio. In fact, at the speed of light. And if we use that transmission medium, the speed of light, what we do then is we do things called wave division multiplexing. So a piece of glass, a small piece of glass, has many, many lasers going down it in either different bandwidth frequencies or different paths. So one piece of fibre optic can take up to 2,500 telephone calls at once, all at the same time. Because we're dividing the bandwidth, the signal, the frequency to allow that to happen. So as you can see, and that goes at the speed of light. So it doesn't go like your mobile phones are all over a radio cellular frequency. It's not as wide. The bandwidth is not as wide with cellular frequencies. So fibre is really a massive component in communications networks. It's played the role in that and boosted the strength of signals. As I said, when you have a cellular signal, you'll see that you have all these little towers. And most of those towers are capturing your signal, but they're also amplifying the next person's signal. Fibre can take things a lot further without that signal boost. It does have to have signal boost, so I've just put a fibre optic cable in between Riyadh and Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, and that's got 14 different repeaters. If I was doing that with a radio signal, it'd have 400 different repeaters. So you can see the efficiency of glass and also the speed of it. Glass is used to produce all sorts of different devices, optical fibres, modulators. What's a modulator? A modulator is something that actually takes a signal, takes another signal, and actually puts them, if you like, Polaroid. You know, you can look at a Polaroid through a pair of Polaroid glasses, and you turn it that way, and it's black, and you turn it this way, you see right through it. That's what it's basically doing. It's taking those different frequencies and allocating them to different, what we call channels. Without glass, there'd be no internet. We wouldn't have the ability to use the internet. It would not exist. So, you know, that is a fairly important part of telecommunications, having access to the internet. So, I think the role of glass in telecommunications is fundamental. I've talked a little bit about this already. The difference between optical and radio signals. There are two types of what we call transmission media, two types of how we can send signals. And we all think about radio signals back into, you know, the First World War, when Marconi first did it out of North Wales. You know, it's a signal which is transmitting itself around something which is at the speed of sound rather than the speed of light. And that's what we all did for many, many years, because we didn't have the technology to take the light signals and superimpose other things on top of them. So fibre optic transmission actually does allow us to do that. And as we start moving forward, there are some things that can't be delivered over radio or mobile or cellular, wherever you come from in the world. You know, it's the same technology. For instance, how many of you put your television on and you try to download something and there's a little wheel that goes... Now that's effectively something called latency. And that means the signal's not getting to your endpoint as quick as it should do. If you have a fibre optic cable into your house, you won't see. You'll actually see real-time signal. So you know, look around you, and I don't know how many of you have got BT broadband now with that fibre optic into your house, and you will have seen the difference in that delivery of content. It's called latency. The latency of where it starts and where it ends up. So as we move forward, those connections into the house or into the PC or into a gaming environment, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, are absolutely essential. You can't do without it. You know, just imagine that you're watching a James Bond film and it's 2.5 hours long and you're still there in 3 months. Because it's just going round and round. I mean, I think EE have got around where they show a young girl gradually aging while she's got this wheel going round. I mean, that's a sort of a magnificent example of what couldn't happen, but it is telling you that there are issues with speed. And when you buy your broadband connection, you'll say, can I have 40 megabytes or 40 gigabytes or 100 gigabytes of download? You're actually paying for that. It's the reason that you're getting that the glass is getting closer to your house. All those systems, those modern distribution systems for telecommunications and for any content delivery, is getting more and more towards glass being fundamental in it. Now, some people have been telling me that there's, some of these fibres are now plastic, but they're not as good because they actually absorb some of that frequency, and by the absorption of it, they need more repeaters and they can't go as fast. So that's why glass is massively important in this. In summary, fibre optic transmission is faster, more efficient, and better at delivering content. So what we've talked about so far is content that you're consuming on a piece of glass, usually. So going forward, we've got something emerging called the Metaverse. And what's the Metaverse? So it's a virtual world where we're going to... I can let you have this presentation. Well, it's kind of your PC. I'll let you have copies of it if you want to. There's nothing commercially sensitive about this. It's just my idea. So if you want to distribute it, please do. The Metaverse is a new environment, a place where people will interact with each other in different ways. You can shop in the Metaverse. You can buy property in the Metaverse. It's a virtual world. It's a reality that is happening in front of us, but within us. And that's sometimes difficult to get your head around, but you will see that anybody in here that is a Gen Z? No, we haven't got it. That's people born after 2000. So, they actually consume this all the time, and it's immersive. They immerse themselves in it. We'll talk a little bit about having headphones and so goggles on. That's really where they're existing at the moment. But as we move forward, that will change, and I'll tell you a bit about that. So the Metaverse, it lets us interact with each other in a different way and participate in a different life, if you will. Well, when this first started, we've had about 3 or 4 manifestations of the Metaverse. One of them was a game about 10 years ago called Second Life. Buy some property in, the equivalent of Venezuela, but it's not Venezuela, it's somewhere else. And it really got some hype around it. But it's kept itself going, and it's allowing people to interface. If any of you have got any children, a lot of them will be playing games in virtual reality now. It's not as big as you would think. It's not, the market is not that big yet, but it is going to grow. And the way that you usually take the temperature of what's happening is when you see large companies investing huge amounts of money. And in this environment, there are some big tech giants that are investing billions of dollars in the metaverse. Billions. And there's billions going into AI and there's billions going into the metaverse. In fact, it's one of the reasons that Facebook have renamed themselves Meta. That's what they call themselves now, Meta. They want to be the first in the metaverse. When you think of that, they want you to think of them. So let's not get that wrong. They're putting that much money into it. There is definitely going to be a future. And what can glass do in that? Well,
Can I interrupt? I still haven't got what Metaverse is. I don't think I'm...
Okay, let's go back then.
Can we just go back?
Yeah.
You said it's all about shopping and...
I said it's about
today.
It's interacting with something which isn't physically real with you.
Why do you have it?
Why do you have it? Why do you have it? It's a good question. Why do you have it? Why do we have the internet? It's something that you
real.
It is. It's real to a lot of people. It's not a physical asset. It's a virtual asset. Okay, let's stick with that because that's an interesting question. It's a virtual asset. So if I wanted to explore something in the metaverse, in fact, a great example is I've done some work for the UAE for their government, and they've got 3 government offices in Dubai. 2 of them are physical and 1's virtual. So you can go and sign on with your social security in the metaverse. You can walk into what looks like a building, and you can actually interact with somebody who will give you your social security check or put something into your bank account. And when you can actually talk to people in there. They're not people. They're sort of entities that are actually interacting with you.
Dodgy to me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. You may well think it's dodgy, but we all thought the internet was dodgy when it first started. But it's effectively. Another example is that we have lots of your children will play games.
Minecraft.
Well, Minecraft's an interesting one. So they play games, but they're not playing against real people in a lot of it. They're playing against avatars. They're playing against things that have been programmed by somebody else. And it's a progression of where our life is. It really is. Unless you get your head around it, and I'm happy to talk, get your head around it because it is happening and it's there. Yes, sir.
So it's an interesting concept. Just trying to answer the gentleman's question. We had a sales conference last year in the Metaverse, whereby effectively we had 1,400 individuals in a virtual environment. Everybody created a version of themselves. So our CEO turned up with a pair of flip-flops on, a pair of shorts, and ultimately when he wasn't presenting, he was in a virtual environment playing five-a-side football. Now, individuals of a certain generation, I include myself in that, would think, what the heck is all that about? But if you think about the generations today, that's what they're used to, that level of immersion.
Yeah, absolutely right.
In that virtual environment.
They're used to multiple experiences.
Yeah, they're used to multiple experiences. I have just done something that is going to be on the Metaverse. This might be able to explain a little bit better for you, actually.
It's coming.
All right. Well, I'm in the creative industries as well. I mean, we didn't talk about that. Right. I have when I got compulsory purchased, I had a few bobs, so I started doing some experimentation. And one of those was with my brother. You might know my brother.
Is he virtual?
David Morrissey.
Yes.
The actor. So we've just done in Cambridge, it says Canterbury, last summer, all of Marlowe's plays. All of them. And people now can consume them on the Metaverse. All he did was read the script. And we superimposed them into characters in the Metaverse, and people can now watch Marlowe's plays. Never been done. Marlowe's plays, all 7 of them, have never been produced for 500 years, 400 years. We're the first ones that have produced those plays, but we've produced them with virtual actors. We had people like Dominic West out of The Wire he was playing a couple of people in there. So we've got those voices, but actually their characters are playing on stage with sort of authentic music and authentic backgrounds as if they were in the globe. That is something like immersing yourself in, and it might interest you that. Tickets are on sale if you want. So that's an example of how that could work. And in fact, I'll go a little bit further with that. We're selling tickets for individual seats. So you can have seat F6 and you will see what you would have seen from seat F6. And you'll hear what you would hear if you were in seat F6. And they're called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. You actually buy one of those and you own it. And if you ever want to sell it, then I will get a commission because you're selling it on to somebody else. But it's that sort of environment. So get yourself into, I can exist somewhere else, very much like you at the sales conference. You would probably have, I would think, a more casual conversation with the MD if you're playing five-a-side with him, rather than he was sitting in his office telling you got it wrong. So you can actually then use it to your advantage or disadvantage, but you're in somewhere else.
Professor, may I ask a question? There was a very disturbing statement there that it gives an alternative to reality.
It does.
Now, what are we beginning to think and plan forward to handle the mental effects this could have on people? We see social media now wreaking devastating effects. Now, this is going to roll ahead whether we like it or not, but I think there are some very disturbing aspects to it.
I'll wait till slide number 6. I didn't plant him there. I'm afraid.
No, really.
Yeah. It's Debbie McGee.
An alternative reality.
Well, a lot better now. If she's here, I was only kidding.
She's in the Metaverse.
She's in the Metaverse. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about, how glass enables it. And it will enable it. I mean, we can't have it. This concept, this virtual reality, or what people are calling augmented reality, can't exist without glass. It just cannot exist. We can't actually talk to people in that sort of environment without doing that over fibre optic cables. It does not work over radio. It may work over 5, 6, 7. It may work over 9G when we get there. That's a long way off. So we're already there with glass. So it provides the highest resolution of things we can imagine at the moment. And if we're in these sort of environments, these augmented reality environments, we want that definition. We want it to look as if we're somewhere, as well as being there. So the use of glass in the Metaverse will enable the creation of highly interactive communications. But it also provides the ability to put security on top of that. And that's really where we've got to put our concentration. So glass technology will be used to enhance the security within and the privacy of users in the internet, which is exactly your point. And I'm passionate about this. And in fact, it's on another slide, I think. Yeah, it's on another slide. I'm on the select committee for the House of Lords for the Metaverse and what we're calling Web3, trying to work out what the security environment is, what the ethical environment is, and how we put some rules around it. Now, we got there too late with the internet, with social media. We let it fly off the handle without understanding what the consequences will be. If we do it again, that's our fault. You get something wrong once, okay, don't get it wrong twice. So I'm part of that committee. We meet about once a month at the House of Lords. Some really, really powerful brains, a few exceptions, that are thinking about that problem and how to solve it. So the benefits of glass, I can skip through this because I've been talking about the same thing. It's keeps us going. It creates virtual reality. Just that last statement is really quite interesting. Never mind goggles. we can talk about contact lenses. That's the closest piece of glass. But there are experiments going on in British universities and American universities that are having eye-to-brain connections with glass. So in other words, you are going directly into your brain. You're into those receptacles. Now that's very, very early stage, but can't do it without glass. You just can't transmit that speed. So that's something profound to think about. It's called the brain-to-eye interface. So the challenges, and this is really where you're talking about. Challenges are, the Metaverse with hundreds of thousands of challenges. Because as you say, social media can destroy people. I'm working on a piece of legislation now, which most of the world's telcos are going to take on, about transparency and ethics of what's going on with that interface. And that's big. And we're going to start putting on balance sheets of large organisations, never mind the sustainability goal, what is your ethical goal against AI, emerging technology? How do you deal with that? And lots of organisations, I'll give you a classic example of organisations that are going to do this. Google, last year, they employed a chief ethics officer. So that they knew what was going on inside Google was actually controlled by the chief ethics officer. She got sacked after 3 months because she told something that they said was trade secret, and she said it was breaking the ethical code. So you see, we've got to put restrictions and governance against these big companies, and they are big. I mean,
how do you do that when governments very much push the development of AI and that technology?
Well, there are some great organisations in the UK, like the Ada Lovelace Institute, that are actually pushing that forward. European governments, are working on those structures as well. And that's you've got to put governance around government. Governments have got to put governance in. We're traditionally way behind the curve. But you'd be surprised at the amount of people who are now saying, no, we need that. That committee I'm on, the All-Parliamentary Committee, there are 5 of them, 5 committees. Mine got Metaverse and Web3. Yesterday was the AI. So if you go on Parliament TV, yesterday you will see a question put to the head of Google in the UK, how are you going to protect this? What does it mean? What are you going to put in? And if you don't, then we will stop you. I mean, that's the only way to do it. The only way to say is, if you have an ethics officer, the ethics officer doesn't report to the CEO. The reporting structure is not the same as usually in one of these companies. The ethics officer got independence, and it was really, really a big issue when Google sacked this lady. If you look at that, just look that up last year, there was absolute uproar. They replaced her with another lady who's just done exactly the same thing that she did. She said they were doing some stuff in image recognition that they thought was unethical, or unethical, or not ethical. I don't know, whatever, it wasn't ethical anyway. And they haven't had the ability to sack somebody else to do it.
But the question is, as you push forward with this, even like with the AI and the development, who states what's ethical and not ethical? Because sometimes you've got things happening in companies that are developing things that may extend the boundaries, but you don't know what they're going to extend until you've explored.
Well, and that's absolutely right. I mean, it becomes really it's a philosophical situation. I mean, we've got philosophers, from Oxford as part of this, understanding what is ethical and what's not. Ethics is subjective to where you are in the world. The ethics in Nigeria may be different to Iceland. So you're trying to get to a common ground of what is ethical in your organisation or your company or your region. And it's a difficult problem, but you can't ignore a difficult problem.
But how do you do the ethics when you have, say, an American company, an establishment, controlling something that's worldwide, and then you've got a UK government with its legislation? asking an American company with their own idea of what ethics are, and their government with their own idea of ethics.
I think that's a whole nother lecture.
No. Let's pursue that point, because I would have agreed with you 8 years ago. I said you can't influence that. But the European Union did do something that influenced that.
Yeah.
They put in the GDPR regulation. Now everybody in the world follows GDPR, even if you're in America and you've never been in Europe, because you deliver services into Europe. And then you have a virtual interface of where you're delivering your services. And that's where it really can happen. So it's those virtual connections, the interfaces, the borders. We're all looking at the borders in Northern Ireland at the moment. How you manage borders in a technological environment is really difficult. Yes, sir.
No.
Oh, I thought you agreed with me. Debbie, come on.
Shaking my head in wonder.
Yes.
It is probably for another lecture, but it just I tend to think of big US or Western type of corporation as the main war in AI, but in reality there's another part of the world, China namely, which has zero GDPR, a completely different approach to use of data. And so there are very deep considerations that go all the way to security in a way, security about the use of AI.
Yeah.
And how that influences day-to-day life, but potentially also can be weaponized in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a really challenging topic.
I'm going to disagree with you now because you're not quite right. China have just brought out a data protection law, and all of their companies are, it's not called GDPR, obviously they don't want to copy that, but they've just brought out a law that means that you cannot use individuals' data for your benefit. So very similar to GDPR, and it also has the right to be forgotten. Now, whether they can implement it or not, and whether it's a sham, I'm not telling them, but I'll tell you they are.
Surveillance, etc. But yeah, okay, good point.
And most of the world's very big gaming companies are owned or partially owned by Chinese companies. Most of the world's blockchain miners, and I'm not going to go into that, that is a different lecture, are present in China. So, we've got to be very careful of how we let this technology be exploited and how we use it.
Can I ask a question around that? How's the National Security and Investment Act impacting that on what's being done in terms of things that are being bought by, for example, by Chinese companies, so Nextperia being a good example?
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a lot of games companies in the UK that have been bought by something called Tencent, which is the biggest gaming company in the world. Yeah, there are regulations, due diligence done, and there are almost MOTs. That's the government long time. That's the best way I can explain it. People have got the right to go in and examine what's going on, and we've got to be better at that. We've got to have the examiners who are as good as the developers. So we need to make that environment very encouraging for people. Get involved in this security environment. I mean, it sounds really dull, but it's not. It's very, very exciting. And we need to, in the early days of encryption or cipher, we have this. There's people who encrypt and there's people who de-encrypt. And we've got 5 minutes to tell a great story about this. Actually, it happened in GCHQ. So GCHQ is where our national security is housed, if you like. It's the Langley of, that's the American equivalent. And there's a great writer called Simon Sharma who wrote a book called The Encryptors. And he tells a very, very good story about GCHQ. This will be 20 years ago now, maybe 25. Used to take people from where they thought was the best universities, Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, wherever, and train them as being encryptors. How do I encrypt something? And they had they have people who are encrypting, people who are de-encrypting, and it usually lasts about 3 months. So somebody encrypts something, and within 3 months somebody else has decrypted. So the encryptors are back in play, and then the decryptors are back in play. And they had a really unusual occurrence that this thing that they'd encrypted hadn't been de-encrypted for 2.5 years, which is unheard of. I mean, it just, so you know, it was actually the mecca of encryption. And they kept going back to the universities and saying to people, come in, and they give them a test, an hour's test. Here's a piece of code, try and decrypt it. They had something like 40,000 people through the door trying to decrypt this code. Anyway, one day this guy comes in, and he put him in the room for an hour, and he come out and he said, no, impossible. And the guy said, well, don't worry about it. He said, you know, we've had 40,000 other people like you come through the door. So he was walking him out, and the guy came towards him, and he said, George, what are you doing here? He said, I've been working here for 20 years. He said, well, let's go for a pint, you know, sort of thing. So we walked out, and the guy who was escorting him said, do you know George? He said, yeah. He said, well, he's the guy that did the encryption. He said, let me get back in that room. And he went back in the room and he decrypted it in 25 minutes. And the reason he did was really interesting. So the guy asked him afterwards, he said, well, what changed? He said, we both went to Manchester Grammar School, and I came first in maths every year, and he came second. And that is a true story. Now, those two guys stayed at GCHQ for about another 10 years, 15 years. And when they retired, they published their findings, because there were no use anymore. They'd gone out of it. But it transpired that their encryption technology was something very similar to the encryption that we use all over the world. You know, these little things with your bank cards, two-factor authentication. And that was all based on something called FRSA. There were 3 guys in the States who invented that, who were billionaires. And when they published this paper, it was exactly the same encryption that they'd come up with 10 years later. So these guys had invented all of that. And the great end to the story is RSA gave both of them £5 million each. And said, you were smarter than we were at that point. And but I'm saying that human ingenuity actually does get somewhere, and it's worth something. So the challenges of the metaverse, what we've got to really look at is how we protect it, how we make it accessible to everybody, how we don't let people be bullied on it. And it's still in its inception at the moment, so we've still got the chance of actually influencing that. And we've got to move at the speed of, and that's why I said about the encryption and de-encryption, we've got to move at the same speed. We've got to make people who are trying to do these things, the ethics, the transparency, the accountability, we've got to encourage people to be in those fields. Those are looked at the moment, are looked at very slow moving fields. Why would I want to do that? So we've got to flash them up, we've got to make them more appealing to our next generation. I know we said young people then, but I got into an argument the other day about that, where somebody was saying, no, we need to get young people into business. And I said, well, what about the olderpreneurs? You know, and I think we've all got something to give back into there. So it's one of my hobby horses then. So we need to make sure that we're using the best technology and the best tools to protect this, as well as letting it influence our lives. And that's the committee I'm on the House of Lords. I'm passionate about it. So, conclusion. It's not a bad thing, glass, is it really? It works. It's continuing to work, and it will continue to work. And these are all just... Somebody said to me once, when you make a speech, tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again. So I'm not going to tell you again. But that's apparently the formula for good presentations. So I've got a couple of other slides, but they're really just talking about the same thing again. And I know I've gone on too long. So if there's any questions? Yes, sir.
2 questions.
Sorry. You can only have one at a time.
Okay, go on. Yeah, one at a time.
Prioritise.
The first one is, you talk about the metaverse and how we need to get fibre to the individual.
Yeah.
And that won't happen till 9G, which is probably several decades away. So what is going to be the development in glass technology to enable immersive metaverse experiences for individuals?
Well, yeah. So there's a gap. There's a gap from where the fibre finishes to where you are.
Where I consume it.
You consume it. So the closest piece of glass could be
and I'm running on a Wi-Fi.
Your brain, yeah. You're just not going to get there. Right. So you need to get closer to glass. Right. So I'm doing something in Southern California at the moment with these gaming centres, these epic gaming centres. Yeah. Each one of those desks are connected by fibre to the metaverse. The glasses are connected by fibre.
The
physical glasses are connected to physical fibre.
Right. Okay.
Your PC is. So we're trying to get as close to you as possible, so that you have that no cellular interference, if you like. And we're seeing more of that. Sorry, this lady was first. And you can have your second one. I'm very happy to take questions. Yes.
I was interested when we were talking about accessibility. Given the wide gap that there is now between the haves and the have-nots, not only in this country, if you have to live in a valley, but if you talk about the wider world, is fibre optic and the future of this going to improve that or make the gap wider?
It's got to improve it, but it's getting it out there.
But I mean that's why cellular.
That's
a statement. Will it? Will it make it easier? Will it be easier?
It will make. It'll make it much easier if you are connected to a piece of fibre. But getting the piece of fibre there is the issue. So here in the UK, you're talking about valleys and things like this. The DCMS have put a program called the Gigabit Scheme because they got very, very, very fed up with. Is anybody from BT? You used to be. But very fed up with the fact that BT and Virgin only were putting fibre into places where they can make a profit. Only in big cities. So they put this gigabit scheme, £5 billion worth of infrastructure that they're giving to small local companies to build out the fibre. And people are bidding on it.
There's a link to the gigabit scheme on the glass sellers website if you go to the fibre optic page. Thank you.
Just to your point, it's not BT, Virgin and Sky. There are 720 companies signed up to that scheme. So
will they do the middle of that?
Not with the gigabit scheme, they won't. Not with the gigabit scheme, they won't. But start at home.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I work in the telecom industry, so full disclaimer.
I'm in trouble now.
So two things.
Chatterhouse rules in here.
It's related actually. The reference to glass that you make is the fiber optic, but another important aspect in this context, just thinking about is the silicon in the chips, which
absolutely.
is as
I did say that in there.
So it all goes back to glass.
It does.
The other one is whilst I'm sure 9G, when it eventually comes, will be amazing, we shouldn't fully discount the potential of the current technologies, because they infill where fiber doesn't arrive, and 5G in a couple of years could, in some situations, could provide the latencies as low as 20 milliseconds, right? So it really depends on what you need it for, and the ability to actually kind of use the best of each technology is actually what is really going to make the difference.
Yeah. I'll go back to the beginning. I sit on the 5G committee for C.Eng Forum, which is the global standards body. And 20 milliseconds will not work if you're trying to play a game in the metaverse. But it's fine. For other things, it's great. But I was brought here today to talk about that.
So I think
I've got one more question.
Okay.
So this is a bit of an odd question, but it links glass and entrepreneurship, right? So I read recently that, I'm disappointed at our inability to support entrepreneurs and commercialise innovation. And the story you told at the beginning about these two gentlemen, I actually read that story, and they created...
See, it's true.
It totally is true. And So I heard that there was a startup company in the UK, somewhere in the south coast, and they innovated and created a faster way of communicating, of sending these signals. And they do it by creating a vacuum down glass pipes. Startup bought by Microsoft for a princely $100 million plus sum, consumed within Microsoft, a big corporation, and we don't get to scale it in this country. And how do we solve that problem? That for me is a breakthrough technology, apparently, right? It's going through a vacuum, right? Particles traveling faster, no repeaters. So why is this technology slipping through our fingers all the time? We innovate a lot, we don't commercialize it at scale.
How long have we got here? So my fund has got 160 different companies that we've innovated, that we've grown from a problem to commercial idea. And I think you're absolutely right. You've got to see what that commercialisation is. And our universities, unfortunately, are more interested in publishing articles than making money or making a difference. So that's a big thing. The statement you made is probably not quite true. It can't go faster than thin white. No, what it does is it doesn't attenuate as quickly. Right. So the vacuum allows you to move it to a place where it's not going to attenuate as quickly, because there's no air inside that to interfere with that.
There's no degradation.
But it's a great technology. I've read about it, and I will predict that in 5 years Microsoft is selling that as a commercial product.
I think it's going to be huge, by the way.
I think that we'll be selling that to every glass manufacturer, every telco in the world.
I agree.
Because you don't need to put repeaters in as much as often. And I can get from Riyadh to Jeddah without a repeater. We're 14 in the one. So, any other questions, or am I getting thrown out?
I think we can chat over supper. So, and yes.
And again, thank you to Vanessa for that.
Most welcome.
So, Master Wardens, members of the court and livery, ladies and gentlemen, I've known Paul, as he will tell you, for ages, and I'm very pleased to have been asked to give this vote of thanks. Paul, on behalf of the worshipful company of glass sellers and our guests, thank you for the informative, entertaining lecture. You've given us a lot of food for thought. The key things for me are the bits that you said that we need to publicize very clearly, that there is no internet without glass. Because even within the glass sellers, sometimes people wonder in technology what glass does. Okay, so that is really good. And the other thing is, to make things happen in the metaverse or whatever else, glass has to be everywhere. So those are the two strong messages there. The other one is about the metaverse. Now, like you said, we can talk for ages. Vanessa and some of the others raised some good questions, is how you regulate the metaverse. And I don't think we can wait till things happen. Someone needs to be thinking they're happening now, right? And each individual government will be doing its own thing. Corporations will be doing things, and then China will be doing something else. So it's a challenge for you guys.
Massive
definitely. Okay. And the other one is very interesting, was the eye to brain interface with glass. Never heard of it, and that is something I'm going to go and have another look. So,
cost you a few bob.
I'll sit with you and a bottle of scotch, and I'm sure we'll talk like we've done before. So I think, in a way now, I need to say thank you again for a very convincing case for glass. Okay, as being crucial for the development of the metaverse and for the future of communications. Okay, and you made a really good case, and some of us probably weren't, even though we are glass sellers, we weren't aware of the impact for this. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in showing our appreciation to
now the clerk wants us to go over there and he'll give us a drink. Okay.